Mark's resume, and he has a very, very rich and diverse background in academia as well as governmental experience, where he has been involved in public health and health insurance issues for many, many years. He's also been a faculty member at Georgetown, Johns Hopkins, and Cornell University. So Mark, we very much appreciate your willingness to join us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mike, for the generous introduction. Of course, talking about a rich diversity of jobs often means someone's held a lot of jobs, which may mean they can't hold one, or it might mean they're a bit of a dilettante. You can take your pick after you hear this. I'm really happy to be here. I love the Village Movement. As we were talking about before this went live, I was previously on the board of Chevy Chase at home, so I'm a big supporter as well. So let me just share this, and there we go. That worked. Okay, so I'm here to. Everyone can see, I assume. I'm here to talk about Social Security, as you know. Social Security, it should be emphasized, is an enormously important program. I think many people are surprised at the scale of it. It's called the third rail of American politics, and the main reason is so many people receive it. Currently, about 66 million people receive Social Security each month. And there are three broad categories of Social Security. One is the one I think everyone thinks of, and is most, and all of us on this program are probably nearly all of us probably recipients of retirement insurance. There is also survivor insurance, and some of you may receive that. And then there is disability insurance as well. But by far the largest number of recipients are retirees. 1 in 5 Americans get Social Security benefits, and more tellingly, about a quarter of all households in the country have some member in it who receives income from Social Security. So who gets it? And the data I'm giving you, by the way, is current, is the most current. It says 22, but that's because there's always like a 2 or 3 month lag in the statistics. So there are 48 million retired workers. There are about 7.5 million disabled workers, or disabled non-workers, actually. Close to 6 million widows and widowers receiving survivors benefits, 2 million spouses, and a little over 3 million children who receive Social Security benefits. The children's benefit has actually been reduced. The children's benefit is the children of the under 18 children who are under 18, whose parents who receive what they would have received if the worker retired at that age. So someone really has to be it's for older parents actually. But it used to be a much more expansive program. So that's one area where benefits have been cut over the last couple of decades. So let's talk about how it works. I remember when I was a kid and had my first job where I actually got a real paycheck. I was a teenager, and I'd get this check and I'd see FICA was getting some amount of money, and I said, well, who's FICA and why are they getting my money? Well, that of course is the Social Security tax. It's a payroll tax, and the workers, both workers and employers, and I think all of you know this, each side pay 6.2% wages, and up to a wage cap. And the wage cap goes up every year with the cost of living. For 2023, the wage cap is $160,000. I don't know if any of you are still in the labor force, but if you are, they'll stop taking money out if you reach $160,000. It's on the top bullet says it's regressive going in, and that's not in a program. The term regressive in tax talk means that it's a flat tax. Regressive really means that it's a bigger bite on people who making a little money as opposed to big money. So I mean, the way to look at it is, so it's 6.2% up to $160,000. Well, if you make $1 million a year, which the top 0.5% does roughly, if you get that in salary, you're not paying 6.2%. You can kind of try to do the numbers in your head. It's more like less than a percent. Whereas someone who makes, say, $20,000 a year or $30,000 a year does pay the full 6.2%. That's called regressive, and that the term is important because we're going to be using it later on as well. So it's a pay-as-you-go system. When I give this talk to graduate students, which I've done, I thank them because it's their Social Security taxes that are paying for those of us who are retirees. There is not a lockbox somewhere or a bank account which has your money in it. Your money is all pooled, and it's actually payroll taxes that pay a big chunk. They used to pay all, but now it's simply a large chunk of the benefits that the rest of us who are of retirement age get. Until recently, there was a surplus. That is, payroll taxes were more than enough to pay all benefits, and that surplus would go to what's called the trust fund. And the trust fund is a big pool of money, but again, it's not a big stack of greenbacks sitting in Fort Knox or gold bullion. There are special government securities, government bonds, which Social Security system owns, and the income on those bonds then goes to pay benefits. And this system has been in place for at least 50 years or so. Okay, so how does the system work? What happens when the money goes out? Well, remember I said it was regressive going in. That is, everyone pays the same percentage. If you make $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, your percentage of your total income that you pay is a whole lot less than the worker who makes $50,000 or $60,000. It's flipped going out. The more you earned, the lower your replacement rate. Now, in pension speak, replacement rate is what it sounds like. It's actually the percentage of your income that's replaced by a pension, and it's almost always less than 100%. The question is, how close to 100% do you get it? And I'm going to show you. When you retire, and I expect most of you are already receiving benefits, particularly those of you who are over 70. Probably all of you are receiving benefits because you kind of have to, unless you're still working and have a employer plan. So those of you who are working, who have already retired, you got a notice from Social Security and that told you what your benefit is going to be. It never really explains how it came to that, and you kind of have to take their word for it, which is a little scary, but that's the way it is. But I'm going to show you what goes on inside the black box. And that has to do with something called bend points, and you'll see why in a second. The bend points, the amount changes every year, so I had to write in the actual ones for this year. There's something called Amy. Amy is not a girl. AIME is AIME. It is adjusted income, adjusted indexed mean income. And what that means is, I'm sorry, not mean income, monthly income. Social Security actually knows what you made every single month of your working life from the time, many of us started when we were teenagers with part-time jobs. But you probably, even if you worked a full-time job when you were a teenager in the summer, you might have made at most 150, 160 bucks a month. Well, that 160 bucks a month back then is probably worth more like over $1,000 a month now. So that's what Social Security does. It takes the cost of living index, and it applies to what you made 50 years ago, to what you made 40 years ago, and so on, basically to every single month. And then it determines what your average index means index to the cost the CPI, the consumer price index, and it then calculates what you're going to get. And here's what you get, and this explains it. So up to the first $1,115, you get back 90% of that as a monthly benefit. So if all you ever made in your life was an indexed amount of $1,115, you get a replacement rate of 90%, which sounds pretty good, except it really is barely enough to live on if that's all you have to live on. But it shows that the lowest wage workers get the biggest percentage back. Then from that $1,100 up to $6,721, or I should say the amount above 1,115, all the way up to 6,721. So that's about roughly $5,600. You get only 32% of that back as a replacement rate. And then for the amount, and then for the amount above above 6,000, you get 15%. You get, I'm sorry, up to six. I'm confusing myself here. Up to 6,000, up to $6,721, you get 32%, and then beyond that, you get you get the same 6,021, and that only goes up to whatever the wage cap is. So you basically, even if you made $1 million, you didn't pay Social Security tax on most of it, and so you get nothing back on most of it. It's a little complex, but the only point you really need to remember is that the more you make, the lower your overall replacement rate. So people who say, well, I could have made more money with my Social Security taxes, putting it in stocks and bonds and investing in myself, they're absolutely right if they made a lot of money and put most of it in, and we're able to do that. Whoops, I'm going the wrong way. Okay, so that's how the system works. But let's back up. Why do we even have Social Security? Why don't we just depend? We're a capitalist society. Why don't we just depend on people to save? To save? Why aren't we responsible for our own? Well, one reason we have it is, of course, the Great Depression. And the idea was, and the problem was, most elderly people were in even worse condition than working age people, because their savings were in banks. A lot of them lost all their savings. And so it was partly a solution. It was partly a solution to that. But the solution was not the pension, the solution was that the system also included a lot of money for the states to provide poor relief to the elderly. This was to prevent that kind of thing from happening in the future. So, but that still leaves us with a question of why set this thing up in the first place, because over time the tax system has evolved in a way that gave preference to pensions, and that made money you would put into pensions exempt from taxation. So one could argue that it's pretty easy to save up and it should be your responsibility. Well, there are a couple of reasons. One is the problem of short-sightedness. Even if we did it that way and lectured people, people tend to be short-sighted. People tend to, first of all, we all know that young people think they're going to live forever. But even while they think they're going to live forever, they don't worry if they're very young about saving for old age, because while they're going to live forever, they're never going to be old. That was the case in our era of rock and roll, and it's still the case. And related to that is a free rider problem. As a society, are we really going to let older people our age, be begging on the streets and starve to death? No, we're going to do something for them if they have no money. And in fact, we have programs to do something for people who are in extreme penury. So, and if you know that, if you know the government will take care of you, then, you might not save money. So that's enough of a problem that it needs to be dealt with. There's also an absence of adequate free market alternatives, and I'll tell you why. Social Security is what's called social insurance. It's all over the world. It's called social insurance. This is not an American term. It's a term you would hear in Germany and Finland and Sweden and Italy, all over. I mean, all over our not only our peer countries, but really all over the world. Well, think of the term insurance. Social insurance really means government provided insurance. And we don't need to go into all the details, but it's basically government provided insurance. Social Security is social insurance. Medicare is social insurance. Those are our two social insurance programs. Well, in the case of Medicare, you know what you're insuring against. You're insuring against the cost of illness, and that varies widely across population. But in the case of old age pensions, which is what this is primarily, what are you insuring against? Because as you age, as we get older, there are only two possible outcomes, and universally, only two outcomes. One, you get older and older, or two, you die. Now, if you die before you at the end of your working life, no problem. You don't need any more money. But that's not something we look forward to. So what are you actually insuring against? If this was a class where we'd all be waving our hands, I could wait for an answer, but instead, I know you're ahead of me on this. I'll give you the answer just to make sure we're all in agreement. What you're insuring against is primarily the risk of running out of money. Most people, when they retire, easily have enough money for a year or two. Most, but not all, surprisingly. But and then many of us, if we're lucky, will have enough money for 10 years. But what if you're lucky in one sense and unlucky in another and lived into your 90s in good health? What you're insuring against is running out of money. And that is the basis of this social insurance. Later on in the 1950s, Social Security added disability insurance to deal with the risk of disability. And there's really an absence of adequate free market alternatives. You could think about, in theory, you could think about having an annuity kind of situation where you would, put money in the course of your lifetime and have it be guaranteed, and then money would start paying you a pension. To an extent, whole life insurance is like that. But it is so expensive. It would be so expensive to have enough to live on that it doesn't really, it doesn't really exist. Whole life insurance is really a supplement to what you need. It very rarely will people have enough income to put in to make it possible. So the other thing about Social Security is you're also insuring against inflation. We all got a very big kick up, a big increase in our benefit, in the checks that we're going to get. Some of us, you already have the payment. And you'll notice that it's gone way up, and that's because of inflation. So inflation bites, but for those of us fortunate enough to have this kind of inflation adjusted benefit, that shows that the social insurance is really working. Well, Social Security is not now at the top of the policy items people are talking about, but as we get close to our debt, we've actually today apparently we reached the debt limit, but starting later in the spring and maybe early summer, things are really going to get tense. And so the Republicans want to cut spending, and one of the things they talk about cutting is entitlements. Well, guess what? Social Security is an entitlement, so you can be sure that it's going to resume its place, which it often has. It often occupies as a current policy issue. And the reasons for it perennially being a policy issue there are four major reasons, and they're really kind of interrelated. One is just the solvency of the system. Excuse me. Two is the aging of the population. Three are changes in the pension system, and four is the adequacy of benefits. So let me go over each one in turn. So solvency. The question is the system going broke? And according to the Heritage Foundation, yes. And if they write in a recent paper, our Social Security program is running dry. Policymakers have no plan to fix it, and generations of Americans have been duped into believing it's a good deal. Well, let's see. As I mentioned, currently the Social Security Trust Fund is being drawn down to pay benefits. All the benefits that we get, really starting about a year and a half ago, come from the trust fund. The payroll taxes, I shouldn't say all the benefits. That's not true. Payroll taxes pay for benefits, but whereas it was the case until a couple of years ago, payroll taxes paid entirely for the benefits with no diminution of the trust fund. Now the trust fund is being drawn down. The point at which there will be nothing left in the trust fund will be reached in 2035. Every year, the trustees of the Social Security system work with the actuaries and project that date. A year ago it was 2034. It's healthier now. It's 2035 is the date. But is that actually insolvency? Well, in a sense, yeah, because benefits will actually be reduced, but the fund income is projected to cover at that point 77% of benefits due then. So the check you would otherwise get from the government, or the direct deposit to your bank account rather, will take a haircut of about 25%. Now, this isn't anyone trying to be nasty. The current legislation says that benefits cannot exceed what is covered by the trust fund and payroll taxes. It's supposed to be a self-financing system. But that is simply, the way it is. So if Congress does nothing, it will go down. This has happened before, by the way. The system was close to this situation in the early 1980s. It was projected to run down within 2 or 3 years. Well, what happened was you had a Republican president and a Democratic Congress with a speaker named Tip O'Neill, who all of you know of as the Speaker of the House. And they made a deal. They basically, benefits were reduced. The retirement age was increased. The payroll tax was kicked up a little bit, and the system has been in a state of pretty good shape, and it's only now that we're looking at an endpoint to the trust fund. So, whether you call that insolvency or not is kind of a matter of semantics, but it is not the case at all that you will not get benefits. You will just get less benefits if Congress does nothing. And the chance of Congress doing nothing is nearly zero, just because of the first slide I showed you about the number of people who get it. Excuse me, I have to go get a drink of water. I apologize. I forgot to have a bottle of water with me. Be right back.
No problem. Certainly gives us a minute to think about everything you've said and how it might affect the future. So that's quite all right. I guess Walmart is off getting some water. I want to remind you that there will be time for questions when he's finished. And if you want to put something in the chat while he's speaking so that you don't forget what you wanted to ask, feel free to do that. And I will keep track of the questions in the chat, as well as calling on people when Mark is finished with his presentation. But if you want to place a question in the chat now, you can feel free to do so that we will be prepared at the end of the presentation to answer those questions.
I'm back.
You're back. All right. He's back.
I'm back.
The presentation.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, here we go. So one challenge was insolvency. A very related challenge is the aging of the population. We just heard news a couple of days ago that for the first time, probably in 100 years or so, the number of deaths in China were greater than the number of births. So they have a bigger problem than we do. But we have a problem in that it's a good kind of problem to have, in that life expectancy is increasing. So the population is getting older, and one reason it's getting older is not just the baby boom generation, that is a lot of us, but just because people are living longer. And by the way, there's an urban myth that will not go away, which is that the system picked 65 as a retirement age because life expectancy was 65, and so they didn't think anyone would ever get benefits. That's not true. It's true that the life expectancy was roughly somewhere around 65, but that was life expectancy at birth. And at birth, when the system was started, there were no antibiotics. There's childhood mortality was still quite high. If you lived to adulthood, your life expectancy was actually closer to 70. So that just we can dispense of that myth. But you can see here that this is a graph of life expectancy, and you can see, it's projected. This is life expectancy at age 65, which is what the system cares about. So, it's for females, it gets close to 25 years by 2080. For males, a little bit less. Currently, it's, about 20 years for females and about 17 or 18 for males. So that's a longer period of drawing benefits than when the system started. The share of the population that is elderly, when I hear elderly, I always think of other people. Suddenly I realize that's me, and that's very shocking. and you too. The share of elderly has increased from 9% in 1950. It's going to be 19% in about 2050. So again, that's more people to be supported. This is another way to look at the same thing, but this puts it in real relief. In about 10 years, there are going to be 2 workers for every person who's over 65. When the system was really, accumulating money in the trust fund like gangbusters, there were 16 workers to every retiree. Okay, another thing that people don't think about is the changes in private pensions. Social Security was never intended to be the sole source of retirement. I was an associate commissioner of Social Security, so although my area was curiously not retirement, it was disability. But in the Social Security Administration, we would always talk about a 3-legged stool, the 3-legged stool to support your retirement life. One was your regular old savings. 2, and the biggest one, was supposed to be retirement savings, pension plans, and so on. And the 3rd was Social Security, which would be supposed to be important, but was never designed to be all of it. Well, there have been big changes in the pension world, and I think all of you are aware of this. The world of pensions used to be, when a lot of us first started working, was called defined benefit pension. That is, and that's what the government had. That was its only pension initially. That is, the amount you get is purely a function of the number of years you work and your income, and you could predict what it would be. But increasingly, we've moved to a defined contribution plan. And the defined contribution plan is one where you put in money. It's really up to you. If you're lucky, your employer also puts in money. And the amount you get is really a function of how you invest it, the choices you make in investing it. And there are a lot of options. They're limited, but there's still a wide variety. And you can see in this what this chart shows. If you can see, I think you should be able to see my cursor here, I hope. So the little red boxes up here are the percentage of defined contribution plans. These plans started in 1970, roughly 1979. And under federal legislation, and you can see it just about 6-7% starts at 7%, and now 31% of workers are in this. Now again, when we first started, which is data, 20% of it was like 28% of workers got this. I gotta find my cursor. 28% got this thing here, the little blue boxes, and now it's down to 3%, and that's almost entirely government workers. So it's been a huge change. The political scientist Jacob Hacker wrote a very good book several years ago called The Great Risk Shift. And what that means is where your employer used to bear the risk of inflation and so on, and poor performance of investment assets, now you bear all of that. You bear all of that risk. So that is a bit of a problem. It's also the case that not everyone has retirement accounts. Basically, the lower income you have, the less likely it is that you have any retirement account. What this shows is that of all families, only about half have retirement accounts. And it's really only the top, it's really only the top 40% where really a heavy majority has them. You can also see that median retirement savings, again, this is for all ages, is only $65,000. That's not a lot of money. Another problem is just the fact that you have to make these decisions yourself. Now, those of you who worked in the government know what TSP is. It's the Thrift Savings Plan. It's basically the government's version of the 401k or KEO plan. The federal government is very generous. It contributes well, not very generous, moderately generous. They will contribute up to 5%. So if you put in 5%, you're allowed to put in more, of course, but if you put in 5%, the government will match you, and they'll put in 5% also. So what that means is the day you contribute 5%, you get an immediate 100% return on your investment. Your investment doubles. It's a pretty good deal, but half of participants contribute less than the federal match. That is, they're giving up the possibility to match dollar for dollar up to 5%. Another problem, near 40% of federal employees are exclusively in something called the G fund. What is a G fund? It's basically a money fund. So over the past 6 or 7 years, the money fund has paid us effectively zero. And prior to that, it rarely went above 4%, whereas the average return on the S&P was, well, it varied, but over the past 30 years or so was around 8%, 7 to 8%. So I'm not advising anyone to get out of cash entirely, especially now. But there's no volatility risk. If you get zero return, your zero return is not going to go up, and it's certainly not going to go down. But it's the lowest return. So these are people whose return on investment is going to be way less than the rate of inflation. This is a proportion of employees who invested, and unfortunately, I can't see what's on the right axis because the pictures are here. But you see, not everyone does it, and the returns on these plans. These are all index funds, by the way. So you don't have to make any decisions other than you want to invest in stocks or bonds. And they added small stocks, they added international stocks, but what you see is in this violet color here, even for people in their peak earnings years in their 40s and 50s, their biggest single investment was a money fund, which is really not a prudent way to go. Okay, so now I want to turn to what Social Security means to people, and this gets us to the fourth issue, which is the adequacy of the system. Social Security is the largest single source of income for Americans 65 and over. This is an older chart, but the numbers really haven't changed. A little over a third of aggregate money, that is you take all the money that people our age receive, about a third of it is, a little over a third is Social Security. So let's talk about adequacy. What if you only get Social Security? This is kind of a loaded picture, I know. So what we see is that beneficiaries, these are the beneficiaries age 65 and older whose Social Security benefits make up this amount of their income. And what we see is that for whites, it varies. I want to make a point, it varies by race too. For whites, it's about 65%. If you have half or more, 35% of 90% or more, but about half of blacks depend almost entirely on Social Security. Same is true for Hispanics, a little bit less so for Asians. Another an important piece here is you see that if you look at gender, women, nearly half of unmarried women depend on Social Security. By unmarried, it doesn't mean never married. It generally means widowed, or they're mostly widowed or divorced. They depend for about half of their total income on Social Security, considerably more than men do. What is the average monthly benefit? So these people are depending, you have roughly, a third of the people depend kind of entirely on Social Security. The retired workers, which is what we're talking about, get a little over 50%. How am I doing on time? Well, I've got to, I'm going to wrap this up quickly, and we'll get to questions. So, it's not a lot of money. Think about $1,500 a month. It is not a lot of money to live on. And women have a greater need. If you look at the income of the elderly, women, the median income is considerably less. This is a really, it's a few years ago, but it's still a shockingly low amount of money. So we got a solvency problem, and I'm just going to cut it off here. We can talk more about how you fix it, but it ain't rocket science. If we were in person and all sitting around a table, and I could bring you some, a little computer here to model it all, the group in front of me could come up with a pretty good solution in probably a couple of hours.
Hi, I'm in the middle of Mark's presentation.
Technically, Social Security is technically easy to fix. Politically, it's very, very difficult, because there are two things you can do: increase the money coming in, or you can decrease the money going out. The Democrats prefer increasing the money coming in by bringing more taxes in. The Republicans would rather decrease the money going out. I'm going to just give you some of the options for bringing it in. The most common one is to increase the earnings cap. It's only $160,000 now. A lot more money as a percentage is escaping taxation than was the case 50 years ago. You could increase there's nothing magic about 6.2%. You could raise it to 6.3%. You could have a whole new source of revenue for Social Security, maybe a tax on financial transactions. You can increase taxes on the benefits for those of us who are high income beneficiaries. You could do what they did for the Affordable Care Act and subject investment income to Social Security contributions. Money going out, you could change the indexing formula. You could make benefits lower. You could make the benefits more progressive and just have more money, less money go to those of us who are well off, and more money going to those who are not. You can raise the retirement age again. This is another very, very common one. To raise the retirement age is to decrease benefits. There's no two ways around it. So that's kind of the situation in a nutshell. Obviously, it's a complex issue. I know I raced through some fairly complex things, and that's why we have time for some questions. So please go ahead. I'm going to stop sharing now, and that way we can all see each other better.
Thank you, Mark. I had promised when you went to get water that I would start with the questions in the chat. So I'm going to do that. The first question was whether or not Social Security payments are taxable as income.
Yes, I don't know I don't know the level. They are taxable as income above a certain level of income, which is pretty low. You don't want to be at that level of income where it starts being taxable.
Okay. Next question is, periodically, I have heard that people saying that Social Security Administration would have more money if Congress hadn't borrowed from it. Is that a myth, or is there some truth to that?
Oh, No, it is true that there are special bonds, but they're just like any other bond. The government borrows money and the government uses that borrowing. The reason why the debt limit is such a problem is that because we are continually running a deficit, the government has to borrow money to fund its operations. Part of that borrowing is from the trust fund. So it is true that if the government didn't borrow money, you'd have a different financing system. They wouldn't be bonds. I mean, the reason that their earnings and the government pays interest is that the bonds are used for other productive purposes. It's the same as any savings bond you have.
Thank you. So here you're gonna need your crystal ball. The question is, if we did come to the point that the Social Security payments would be affected by by reduction, how much or what percent is that calculated? And is that calculation across the board for everyone?
Yes, it's across the board for everyone. It's the slide I showed earlier. They're projected. They are projected to be to pay 77% of scheduled benefits, but it's across the board. So if you were getting $4,000 a month, you would get roughly $3,000 a month. If you're getting $1,000 a month, take 25%, make it easy, take a quarter off of that, you'd be getting $750 a month. So it's not the same amount. It's not the same amount of absolute cash. It's the same percentage.
I see, thank you. So our next question in the chat, and then we're going to go to anybody who wants to ask a question live. Will hitting the debt limit have any short or long-term impact on what people are receiving if this is not resolved quickly?
Oh, the answer is, well, the answer is no. But the problem is that in theory, the government, what's happening now is the Treasury Department will increasingly have to pick and choose what gets paid. So they could theoretically shut down the Social Security Administration and just say, well, we'll make up the money later because we can't afford to pay the 100,000 people who work there. Can't afford the electricity to run the computers. They're not going to do that, but it's very, very unlikely. The one thing they've mentioned, which I think is also very unlikely, is Medicare payments. They could simply delay reimbursements to hospitals and doctors, but given the political it seems very unlikely because that could interfere with healthcare. So I don't think they'll do that either. So I think that is safe. I wouldn't bet on your ability to go to a national park, however.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one.
It would be,
So
Yeah,
I
go
didn't realize this was a 2-question comment. The second part of the second question, I should say, is that somebody hasn't hit the top of they haven't maxed out their Social Security, is what I would say. And so they want to know if that's still a good idea to wait, or should they start taking sooner than necessary? And their health, they feel, is good.
you should wait. You should wait as long as you can. I think you have to start taking benefits at 70 and a half, unless you are still working and have an employer provided plan. That is, can be a pension. It can be an employer provided 401k where they're putting money in. Then you can delay it even farther. And if you can possibly afford it, don't take it, or don't take it earlier than 70 and a half. And the reason is that, remember I mentioned annuities. If you look at the amount of money you're leaving on the table, it's true. If you don't take it at your, I think currently the full retirement age is for people who reach 60. I think it's a little over 67 now. If you don't take it then and you wait 3 years, yeah, you're leaving money on the table. But that money, if you took that money and you tried to buy an annuity, you would not be able to buy as good an annuity to make up the difference. So let's say if you retire now at 67 and you're going to get, I'll make it up, $2,000. But if you wait, you're going to get $2,500 a month. Difference is probably a little bit more than that, say $2,700 a month. That extra $700 a month, you couldn't buy an annuity to pay you that $700 extra a month even with all the money that you've left on the table by waiting. The reason is that you get a cost of living adjustment every month of your life, and also it has survivor benefits. So that kicks in if your benefit is greater than your spouse's and you die, your spouse actually ends up getting your spouse gets the highest of two amounts, either what they make on their own earnings or your benefit if you're the one who dies and have a higher, and annuities, no annuity that would provide that you wouldn't get close to being able to match that. So if you look at it in terms of protecting your income and your lifestyle going forward, if you can possibly wait, you should wait as long as you can.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to open it for live questions. If you unmute, please remember I have muted everybody. And so if you have a question, please unmute and either physically raise your hand or electronically raise your hand. And we are happy to ask the expert here. We can ask Mark your questions, or you can ask Mark your questions. Diane, I see you. Thank you.
Mark, about taking the money out later rather than earlier. I seem to remember something from years ago, whereas if you took your money out earlier, that there came a time later on in your life where somehow you made that up. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Or remembering?
Yeah, there is kind of a there is kind of a break-even point, and it kind of depends on how long you live. So if you take your money out, earlier and you live a very short time, you're better off. The problem is you don't know how long a few people do. If you have unfortunately a terminal illness, and you're going to last only a couple of years when you're 67, sure, you should take it out. But if you don't, God forbid, have that issue, you're basically gambling on your longevity, and you're much better off just spending a little bit less and making do with a little bit less early on. So there is that break-even point, but
But where does that come? I mean, how old are you going to be?
It's really a function of the answer is I don't think there's a single answer to that question.
Thank you.
It can be calculated, but I just can't. I can't because it is kind of individual.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, Janet, I see you've unmuted. Did you have a question?
I do. Thank you very much. And Mark, thank you so much for this valuable information. I've been told I'm younger than I look, but I'm definitely in that number. And I wanted to know, what is the benefit, say that you retire, let's say at 66, but you retired from your company, but you did not, or you don't intend to draw your Social Security until you're 70.
Yeah.
What is that? How is that beneficial?
Because your benefit goes up basically 8% a year for every year you wait.
Okay.
So I didn't explain that. Yeah, the waiting means your benefit goes up. No, if the benefit stayed the same, there'd be no point in waiting at all. The point is the benefit goes up 8% a year.
As long as you don't touch it.
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't draw, you can't, it's either all or nothing. You can't go to them and say, I'd like to take half of my benefit. No, it's basically, they figure out what you're owed. You can take it early. There is full retirement age has gone up since it started going up in the year 2000. So it's now a little over 67. You can take it early. But
Right.
that you really get a haircut if you take it early. If you take it a full 3 years early, you give up basically 25% of your benefit.
So,
So unless you desperately need the money, you should never take it early.
so if you're in a position to retire, say 65, 66 and a half, and do not withdraw your Social Security, that is a benefit to you to just wait as long as you can to get to 70 or close to it.
Right. As long as you don't need the money. I mean,
Right.
need is relative. As long as you have some other retirement savings,
Right.
or you can maybe work part-time or something. Absolutely.
Okay.
Unless you're going to die very soon, and very few people do that, you're much better off waiting.
Okay. That's the question that I really wanted to get an answer for.
Okay.
Do you
I'm
leave
glad
it
you
at so?
did.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Louise, I see your hand.
Yes, my question is, if you retire from a relatively high-paying job and then elect to work part-time before you start taking Social Security, how does this affect your Social Security benefits?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I was distracted for a moment.
If you retire from a relatively high-paying full-time job before taking Social Security and continue working, but at a much reduced level, say working part-time, but you're still not taking Social Security, how does this affect your Social Security benefits?
Well, for one thing, if you're still working and still, it doesn't matter if you're working part-time. The question is whether you are being whether you're on the company pension plan or participating. If you're not participating, then you have to take benefits when there's a mandatory age when you have to take benefits. Other than that, the working is actually good because you continue to pay Social Security taxes, and your benefit will go up.
And it's the top few years of earnings, right? That it's calculated on?
No, it's every year, basically. The way they do it, it's every month of earnings from the very first paycheck you got when you were a kid to
Really?
now. Yep.
So
yep.
the more years you work, really the better.
Yes, absolutely. It's not like private pension plans are backloaded. So basically, like in the government, it's the top 3 becomes a big deal. It's not that way with Social Security.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Oh, Hans, I see your hand. Please unmute. Thank you.
This
Yes,
will have to be the last one. I'm sorry, I need to.
okay.
I'm sorry. Okay, Hans, you get the last question.
All right.
It'll
What
be a good
privilege.
one. I count on Hans.
Make it a good one.
It will be
Well,
a
I
good
don't
one.
know. It's just something that came to mind during your talk, which I really enjoyed. What was the motivation to go from a defined benefit plan to a contributed benefit plan? It must have happened in the 80s. Was there political pressure?
It was
Pressure from the
actually
banks or
in
what?
It was in the 70s. It was part of the entire Employee Retirement, ERISA, Employment Retirement Income Security Act. What it was they started out. It started out as just a way to let employees, kind of have IRAs were already around then. And so it allowed employers to basically sponsor these plans as part of an overall pension scheme. But the motive, so it was allowed by the government. But previously, but not previously, but employers started thinking that, well, wait a minute, we have this whole big bureaucracy to run pensions, and when companies have pensions. This is not true for the government, but a private employer has pensions, or a state government has pensions. They invest the money. So, basically they have many millions, billions of earnings. some of that money is supposed to be invested in trust for the employee pensions. They promise these pensions, and they invest it in, everything, same things we invest in, stocks and bonds. They've gotten fancier now with the hedge funds and the derivatives and all that, but basically it's the stocks and bonds and derivatives of those. And they thought, well, wait a minute, we take all the risk. We've promised to pay our workers, a certain amount of money based on their years of work and their income, and we're legally obligated to do that. But why should we take the risk? The government has let us off the hook. We can reduce these or eliminate these, which is what they did, and just give them money right now. That way we don't have to worry about investing for their future. We just take it out of our earnings now as part of compensation. And of course, we also lower our income taxes that way. So that's what happened. And it was never meant as a replacement by Congress, but companies follow the incentives, and it was just more financially beneficial for them. That's why Professor Jacob Hacker called it the great risk shift, because the risk of investing in retirement savings is on you. It's not on the employer. The federal government is unusual in that they still have a pension, although it's reduced from what it used to compared to what it used to be, but they still have a defined contribution plan, which has ended up making people really better off.
Right. So do you think it was a good decision?
I think the way the federal government did it is the safest way, because you at least have some floor. As I showed you when I talked about behavior of people in the federal plan, and I use the federal plan not because federal employees are smarter and dumber than anyone else, it's just because that's one data source where we know how people behave. And we see that, first of all, some of them, a small number, but a small percentage, but still some don't even take advantage of it at all. And of those who do, a lot of them choose something that seems to be safe to them because they're not financially sophisticated. It's really not safe because your overall retirement savings are much more liable to be eaten up by inflation.
Yes.
So that's the problem. So do I think it was good? No. I think it was a better world when employers provided pensions. But even when it did, only about 30%, all unionized workers had it. Beyond them and government employees, it was, the guy who works in a corner bodega never had it. So something is better than nothing. And the addition of individual retirement accounts at least gave people some opportunity to have a savings plan, which they could put in and then deduct it, the amount they're putting in from taxes.
Right.
So
Thank you. Yeah.
That's about it.
Thank you.
Mark, thank you for that excellent presentation. I appreciate your time and your effort, and certainly we've all learned a lot today. Michael, thank you for arranging this excellent presentation. Much appreciated. I want to remind everyone that our next presentation is on February 16th. It is open to all. I put the information into the chat. We have Jim Johnston, who's written a book, From Slave Ships to Harvard, about Yaru Mahmood and his family.
Oh,
He was a Georgetown resident, and I think this should be a really interesting presentation. So mark your calendars, February 16th. Once again, this is offered by Georgetown Village to the community. We hope you will join us, and anybody who would like more information or to sign up for that program, email us. You got here, you can get there. So thank you again. Thank you all, and have a very pleasant evening.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.